All right, folks. Hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis. You're truly Eric Kavanagh here with a couple old friends and true visionaries in the fields of marketing and analyst relations and public relations and strategy. We've got Amisha Gandhi, who got me into the whole influencer marketing thing years ago, about 6 years ago, I guess. Time flies when you're having fun. And Tom Augenthaler as well. And folks, we're going to talk about AI, Gen AI, and how it is changing the game across the board. It's changing business, it's changing workflows, it's changing our priorities. And what does it all mean? We're going to get to the bottom of it in this show. And I'll give you my thoughts to start us off here. Gen AI in particular has opened up the portal. Everyone now understands this stuff is powerful, it's real, it's amazing. It does have flaws. Gen AI is probabilistic, so it's wrong about 20% of the time. If it does a good job, it's wrong 20% of the time. So you have to use it in a certain context, and we'll talk about that. It's great for getting you 80% of the way there. With copywriting for articles, for ads, it writes haiku for crying out loud. It writes all kind of stuff, but you have to fine tune it. You have to pay attention and use it. And general AI, not Gen AI, but old AI, let's call it, is everywhere as well. That's building models, deep learning models that will optimize some part of your business. Think A/B testing or think churn, customer churn, watching out for that. Lots of different models. They're going to be everywhere. They're already everywhere, but this really is a new era in business. And so on today's show, we're going to talk about some ideas for how you can map out your plan and your strategy to leverage these technologies responsibly and change the game. And with that, Amisha Gandhi, I'll bring you in. You know, you were way ahead of the game with influencer marketing, as was Tom. And now you and I are talking about what's happening in the workplace, and things are changing dramatically. There's a story, oh, jobs are going to go away. I think jobs are going to change fundamentally. And so we have to change org charts. We have to change how we structure our organizations and how we divide up the work. And it's all still kind of in flux, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're 2 years in, right? So everyone was freaking out first about Gen AI, everybody's going to lose their job. And now the shift is really, it's a tool, right? And things are happening with announcements all the time of new tools, making it and kind of democratic, democratizing content and other things, right? But
Right.
AI has always been around. Now there's Gen I, Gen AI, and it's like really accelerating. So we're seeing a lot of new roles that have emerged, right? That people are now becoming prompt engineers, right? No one will ever have a first bad draft. There's a lot of
Right.
things around governance and like the language model. Where is it pulling the information from? So there's a lot to talk about and a lot to look out for. But you're really looking for people who have strategy around AI, who can be prompt engineers. How you're bringing it into your, it's in your marketing stack already. Like you said, AI is already built in. How you're building Gen AI in as part of your workflow, right? So you're not really replacing jobs, it's really allowing marketers to focus on strategy while AI handles some of the execution and data crunching, right? And then
Hmm.
you are also looking at teams. You need to upskill and get people trained, right? To use them as tools rather than just hiring AI specialists. There's only be so many people, right? And then you have a junior team. You're gonna have people coming in that are already going to be trained. You have, an older workforce that's training. So you have to really think about that.
Right.
Other things like you can really hyper personalize. We've always talked about that in marketing, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But you're looking at a velocity in content being created, and I think now people are really thinking about what is a quality balance. How do you
Yeah.
create high quality differentiated storytelling using AI, right? You can use it for ideation and drafting, but you still need that strong human oversight layer to make sure it's creative, authentic, and it adheres to your brand voice.
Yeah.
Right. So where are you pulling this content from? Can you just pull from your own content so you can make sure there's cases where people are getting content from their competitors and putting on their website for their blog posts, right? So you really want to prevent against that, right? You have analytics and decision making. You are not just collecting data now, you're actually going to get AI first insights from the tools that you can create and have your marketing stack, right? So you're just getting that first party data enrichment. And now you can get even more advanced audience segmentation data back to you, right? So AI
Right.
can synthesize all this. I used to have to synthesize this all myself. Now you have AI that can do it for you, right? And that can really not just give you back your data and your demand gen, but it can inform your messaging, your positioning, how well it's doing, what's resonating, right? And then, how people are structuring their teams. That's also really interesting. So I want to hear what Tom has to say, and then we can talk a little bit about reschooling, retooling, and how people are structuring their teams.
Yeah, no, you made a whole bunch of really good points there. The one line I'm going to pull out is no one will have a bad first draft. That's a really good point because, again, Gen AI is good. And people have to understand these are consensus engines more than anything. Because of how the Gen AI works, it's been trained on all this text, this giant corpus of text, and it's just pattern matching. So when you give it a prompt, it pattern matches and goes, oh, this person is talking about a marketing strategy for a Fortune 500 company. What are the key components? It'll be very good at that because it's very well published. But it is just giving you the average of things because it's mathematical, it's probabilistic in nature, which is also why it's wrong sometimes. So those are really, really good points. Tom, I'll bring you in. I mean, you are the influence marketer. You've been doing this stuff for a long time. So you realized a long time ago that there's real value in connecting brands with key influencers for a variety of reasons, for content, but also for advice, for consulting, for awareness, and for just kind of triggering ideas and the idea flow. And that's kind of what you use Gen AI for these days, right, Tom? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, for a long time, companies have struggled with producing content which is actually going to be engaging and actually grab the attention of their, constituents, their ideal buyers. And the problem is that most companies really just don't have a lot of budget or they don't have a lot of will, and they just end up doing more of the same, right?
Mm.
So it's, oh, our budget got cut this quarter. Well, do more with less. Okay, well, that's only going to get you so far. And because of that, influencers have actually risen to, they're rising up to the top of the awareness level, if you want to call it that, somewhere where more people are noticing them now more than ever. And that's not just in the consumer space, but that's in the B2B space. And the reason for that is that they have audiences that they've generated over time, because of the kind of quality of content that they produce. And, some of them are independent analysts, some act as consultants, some are pure content creators. It's sort of a mixed bag all over the place. But the fact is that by engaging the influencers, you can actually engage ultimately your ideal buyers a lot better. Now, the
Mm.
Gen AI stuff is really kind of coming into the fore because, again, I think a lot of companies are like, wow, great, we can have blog posts generated in seconds. Well, again, the first draft will be better as a result of Gen AI, but you really have to go in there and edit that. So that's a human function. That's not really a Gen AI function just yet. Uh, and then if you really wanted to do it even better, you'd sort of direct the Gen AI engine, like whether ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever else, you direct it to sort of mimic a voice. So, for instance, that's what I do. I direct ChatGPT to go to my website, to my LinkedIn profile, and I train it to start seeing the patterns of my own speech. So then when I get a first draft, it's even better than it would be normally, right? Because
Right,
it's using
You're
my nomenclature, my acronyms, it's
right.
using the patterns of speech which I exhibit in my own writing.
Right,
Yeah.
you're talking about patterns and language models, right? That's why I think a lot of companies are looking at they have a ton of content already. Is can you pull from what we already have, right? Or, and it's Tom makes a really good point. What you put in is going to determine the outcome you get back from that AI, no matter
Right.
what you're using, right? And so one of the points that we were talking about earlier before this call was, or before this chat, is Tom was saying, we can get like we put everything into Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever it is, then you can put it into other language models like Hemingway or like Copywriter GPT or whatever it is, and you can get a much more curated. But if you ask it to put it in the voice, word count, make it similar to this, but have this voice, but only pull from these articles and pull from these notes, you're going to end up with a really amazing first draft. And then you take it and you put, you curate it yourself, right?
Mhm.
Well,
But you
and this
still
is an
have to
excellent.
have that.
Right. Well,
Sorry, go
this is
ahead.
a good point is that there are multiple models and they do different things in different ways and they specialize in certain things. And so that's going to be an evolving landscape over time as you'll learn that Perplexity is really good for this kind of workload, Gemini is good for that one, and then all the other sort of traditional AI models we talked about, like A/B testing or customer churn
Right.
or pattern recognition, any
Right.
number of things. And the key is going to be figuring out where in the workflow you insert some bit of AI or Gen AI. And there are lots of options for doing that. And I think that what you're going to see, because Amisha, you hinted at this
Yep.
earlier, what you want is for there to be this continuous virtuous cycle of getting insight from the engines, using that insight, getting insight from the engines, using that insight. And my prediction has been for a while now that most of the value from Gen AI and even traditional AI will come in the form of suggestions where you're getting ideas and you can just actively do that or you can set it up to passively do that. But you
Right.
can put these engines into workflows and let's face it, I was always joking with myself about ops. Everyone's talking about marketing ops
Right.
and data ops and dev ops and all this stuff. Well, what is ops? It's the actual work. Like that's
Right.
operations is the stuff
Right.
that humans still have to do, right? So marketing ops is changing dramatically, and that's top of mind for CMOs, right, Amisha?
Yeah, I mean, look, when we had marketing ops, they're pulling together all the data from all these different sources, then you dump it into something else, then you get analysis, and then you have to go back because what you really need to do is if you're really want to drive the business, you have to be able to go back in that business meeting with your colleagues, right? The other sort of heads at the company, product, customer, sales, everyone else, and be able to say, this is what we're driving. This is why we drove it. This is what's working to drive the actual business and bottom line, right? Because that's what they're really interested in, right? It's, people talk about brand and colors and website, that's all plays in. But at the end of the day, we're really on the hook for a number in marketing, right? As a
Mm,
leader. And so when you're thinking about that, you want to show up with that insight. The more, because sometimes you can bring back insight to the company and say, this is what's actually happening. This is what we're finding. And then when you're working with sales together, you're kind of having a reality check of
right.
what's working and what's not based on real data and real insights. You can have all the data. There's so much data out there. It's overwhelming. You really need that layer of analysis, right? And then, so, one of the things that we were just talking about, how is everybody going to structure their teams now, right? Like when you really think about it, we're 2 years in. So a lot of people are doing, in the beginning, they were doing kind of pods. And they still are. And this seems to work really well where you have cross functional teams that bring in someone who knows AI, right? With content creators, data analysts, and campaign strategists. And you're kind of all sitting there together in this pod, and that pod can kind of inform the rest of marketing, right? But they're really the content, data, and campaign coming together, and you have a pod. So that is really focused and dedicated. And then you have someone who's trained and knowledgeable, right? In this kind of new era. But now we're 2 years in. So you're going to be able to find people who've done it and be able to hire them or hire a consultant and bring them in. And then you're talking about ops teams. You're going to have now AI ops teams. You have RevOps, DevOps, right? But you have RevOps in between marketing and sales. You're going to have someone on that team that are going to be managing implementation, tool selection, compliance. That still has to happen because you're still building out your marketing stack, right? You're going to bring in some AI tools. What are you going to bring in? How are you going to integrate it with what you already have? So you kind of need in your marketing ops, rev op, you need that, or you need that there. And then you really have to take a look at your strategy for the year and think about, okay, how am I going to make, because there's a lot of heat, like do more with less, that we have like hybrid human and AI collaboration model. Because now you have
Yeah.
to think of AI as a team member, right?
Yeah.
You're not replacing, but it's a
Right.
team member. So your team is focused on strategy, creativity, emotional intelligence, and the AI is handling execution, automation, and data crunching, right?
Right.
So you really have to think about when you're structuring your team, it's now this tools become not just your marketing stack, but it's almost like it's a factor in a team member almost.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I love this concept of pods. And I'll share something that I learned, gosh, 20 years ago almost at a conference, a TDWI conference, in fact, with Maureen Clary and Kelly Gilmore, and they did this session called something like Power and Politics or something, and it was role playing. And so you'd come in for this session, it's like an all day session, and they'd like hand out cards, and you'd find out what role you're supposed to play, and it would be like junior associate or director or VP or whatever, and you had to tackle projects and just see what life was like from that different world. it was incredibly elucidating because all of a sudden senior executives remembered what it's like to be a junior analyst, to just offering ideas and getting ignored, that whole thing. But what I learned there, but here we could pick this up a little bit in this segment and then in the next segment maybe, is, and I'll throw this out to Tom maybe first, or and then Amisha can comment. I learned the ideal team size is 4. And the reason I say 4 is because at 3, it's 2 to 1. At 5, it's kind of 3 to 2. At 4, it's always even, and it's not often going to be 3 to 1. So it's like it seems easier to come to consensus when there are 4 people talking about something, and you have to decide. Because let's face it, in business, you have to decide. You have to make decisions, and then monitor how well that works, and then adjust. But Tom, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never heard about the number 4 being the optimum size of a team, but
You heard it here
I've
first.
noticed that smaller teams, 3 people on up, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, that works. I see it with my own clients on the team meetings that I attend with them. Conversations can flow, ideas can flow, and we can come to a consensus about pretty quickly about what we want to do. So I think that there's probably a lot of legitimacy to that. I love the idea of pods. I think that's really neat. I think one thing that a lot of companies still struggle with is, well, how do they organize themselves these days? Because still many companies, in my experience, don't have a direct line of communication with the sales team. And as somebody who works with influencers, I hear from influencers about feedback about a company that's not always favorable about the company, right? But they need to hear it. And I bring it back to them, and I bring it back to them in the form of constructive criticism. But the sales team is also out there hearing things too, right? So when
Right.
you're pitching somebody, you're going to get feedback pretty quickly about.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of something. I'm going to throw this out as the segment is coming to a close, though. We use Read AI, and a lot of people are using these tools. Otter, there's a whole bunch of them, and they capture all the notes. They do transcripts. They give you talking points. They give you next steps, action items. All that stuff comes right out of the box. And so now, as an individual, you can use that to kind of manage your own workflow. But managers, if they get access to all those individual ones, can summarize all that. That's what Amisha was hinting at earlier. The number crunching and the summarization can be done by AI, by Gen AI.
Mhm.
So what happens is the senior directors can see what's happening, and they'll get little prompts that say, things are starting to fall apart in the East Coast division. Call those people now. Well, folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking all about Gen AI and automation and how they're changing the game in business writ large. But a lot of us here in this call, we focus on marketing and messaging, articulating vision, value, knowing what to do. And that's one of the big issues. And, we picked up, I'll pick up on the end of last segment. We were talking about Read AI and Otter, and even Zoom has its own thing, and Teams has its own thing. So there are all these tools you can pick and choose from. But the point is, one of the most powerful aspects of Gen AI is this summarization component, where you can take a big chunk of text and say, summarize this for me. It does that very, very well. I've heard some concerns that it tends in long documents, it pulls from the front and the end, not so much from the middle. So there are some interesting issues to kind of watch out for. But that is incredibly useful. And when you think about the time you used to have to spend, okay, what were the action items? It already did those for you, and it sent it to your team. So, like, this is a point about closing the loop in like near real time on action items, who should do what, and just the fact that everyone knows they're being listened to by the machine and it's all categorizing everything. It puts a little more pressure on folks to pay attention and to do what they're supposed to do. What do you think, Amisha?
I mean, I don't think it's the pressure of what, because people get comfortable on Teams and everyone's there and they can hear everything. But I think, would you want, like, as a marketing leader, do you want like my time? My time is valuable, right? So what could I be doing? What work I could be accomplishing instead of writing summary notes or saying like, oh, here's the action team, go
Right.
do it. If you had something like that and then dump it into like an Asana or Monday or whatever it is, and now your team's working, right? And you moved on from the meeting, you have the action items, you're actually working versus, you know, putting in summaries and this and that. And then for data, it doing a lot of analysis for you so you can look at it deeper, do the double click and, kind of ask the right questions. And now we're getting into AI where you can start asking a question. Like even in finance, CFOs can all the tools, those companies who are doing finance, right? They're putting in AI and you can ask it a question. Hey, can you pull up the invoices from blah, blah, blah? Can you show me a
Right.
trend? And it gives you the answer back instead of you having to dig and spend like 30 minutes reading everything and going, oh, this is the analysis. Now it's there. You can do a quick double check you always want to, right? So those things like in marketing, if you get that kind of summary and analysis, you're saving time, you're making decisions, and you're moving a lot faster, right? So I think this is the speed to
Right.
market, the speed to getting things done is getting faster, right? Like when we had Slack, all of a sudden from email to Slack to text, it was like work was moving faster, right? Now with
Wow.
AI, it's like work is moving faster. We're making better decisions, we're getting better outputs if you do it the right way. If you junk in, junk out, remember that. Don't rely just on AI. And then, you're really looking at creating teams that can be productive. And so you're
Right.
not going to have job loss. You may have job gain, right? But we already talked about the first segment, right? So as we go forward, we really need to think about, how we're going to use this, and things like hyper personalization, which has always been talked about in marketing, is going to actually happen now, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking as you were talking, what was in the movie Office Space? They're the reports that he wants everyone to write, the TPS reports. I just asked Gen AI, what were those reports in that movie Office Space? The TPS reports. And you're like, yeah, yeah, I'm gonna need you to come in on the weekend, yeah, and write that TPS. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, no one likes to write a TPS report. Okay, nobody likes to do that. And so to have the machine do it for you is like, oh, OMG. And then to Amisha's point. And this is a really good point. Velocity. We were talking about the three V's: variety, velocity, volume. Of course, there's validity or veracity or whatever. But bottom line is the pace has kicked in to a whole new phase now. Tom, I'll throw it over to you. And organizations have to find a way to kind of capture that energy. This flywheel concept that I love, right? A flywheel captures energy and attenuates, right? So it
Yeah.
helps smooth the movement of the vehicle, and that's kind of what we have here. And we'll talk about knowledge management in the next segment too. But it's like you need this sort of flywheel in your organization to absorb all the incredible input you're getting from this AI and Gen AI, and be able to control how it affects your day-to-day processes and your workflows, right, Tom?
Oh yeah, I'd say that that's pretty spot on. Any sales organization understands the power of momentum. So the more that you start getting prospects into the pipeline, the more you start being able to close them, then you're getting new ones, and it just sort of snowballs because there's an energy to it.
Hmm.
I think that a lot of marketing organizations are slower to see this happen, or to acknowledge it, or to even to know what to do with it. So a lot of organizations I see are sort of still sort of struggling with, what do we spend our time on? Uh, where do we put where do we put this amount of our time to get the maximum ROI on it? And I see them still struggling with that. Yeah, they're experimenting with a lot of Gen AI tools, and I think that those are helpful to them, but they still don't know how to implement a lot of this stuff effectively yet. And I think that's where they're kind of lagging.
Hmm.
But the momentum part from the marketing aspect is very powerful too. And Amisha knows this a little bit better than I do, because being a CMO, she's seen it in action. You get the right people in action with the right direction, and you tell them where we're going and how we're going to do it. And then you tell them this is what we need to do. And then you just start implementing and start. So it just drives itself. So it's almost times hard to put the brakes on once you get it going. But by that point, you've got a really good snowball effect going, and not only producing high quality content that is addressing the needs of your buyers and engaging them, and hopefully bringing back, demand to your own organization that way, but your whole team is then motivated as well. The team is teams like to be they like to see action too. They don't want to sit around in meetings, spinning their wheels trying to figure out, well, where are we going and what do we want to be when we grow up? They want to be doing, and they want to be putting things out there and seeing the results as well. So
Right.
that's where a lot of this stuff can really help if you know how to put it into place.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
seeing the action, seeing is believing. And that's again is a power of a lot of this Gen AI stuff is that, hitherto, if you had some big report that came out that's 20, 30 pages, well, you'd have to sit there for an hour or whatever to try to absorb it, understand it. Now you can just dump it all into a Gen AI engine and ask it for a summary. And you can also get it to summarize very complex data. I mean, and that's really powerful because what I've found is that if you get resistance within an organization, it's usually because people either don't want to do more work or they think that this doesn't make sense. And when you articulate it properly, you get one of my favorite expressions, which is when you put it that way, because that means the mind has just changed. The mind just opened when someone
Right.
says it. It's like, huh. Now that you mention it, that's another one. Now that you mention it, huh? That's kind of, I forgot about that or whatever. But that is the
Right.
process of elucidation and innovation, right, Amisha?
Yeah, it is. I think if people understand the why, like especially marketing teams, they understand why you're doing what you're doing instead of like being told like go do this, and people are like, why are
Right.
we doing this?
That's
It's
right.
like, oh, here's the why. The Simon
Right.
Sinek says it. Understand the why of yourself. Understand the why of why you're doing what you're doing. Right. If you understand that, then that will help your team kind of like swim in the same direction. And then we are talking about Gen AI, but even in any new technology that comes out, right? Everyone looks at marketing like, what are we doing? This is a tool we're all, like Tom said, we're all learning, we're all experimenting. No one has the right answer. We're all figuring this out together. But again, it's a tool, and it's not everything in marketing needs to be Gen AI. You still
Right.
have, you have demand gen, you still have data, you have all these other things you're doing. This is just a tool that's going to help you, right? With velocity, volume. And one thing to keep in mind is, we always talk about in marketing personalization, and we do it by industry, by persona, by within our ICP. With Gen AI, it's allowing you to curate experiences for your prospects and customers that are really personal. So they can ask questions. So now when you go to somebody's website, you can ask a question instead of getting a canned answer. If you do it right, it's based on your own content. It's learned, right? So that language model is coming back. And there are tools. There's somebody who does like, I forgot the name of the company now. They're BDRs and they're like actually on the website, and you can ask questions and it will give you the answer back about the company and try to set up a demo with you. Right. Now, when your salesperson or BDR gets on, it's just a qualified. They know what they've talked about. They know what to send to them as a follow-up from a marketing nurture, right? So
Right.
now you can use it to do the touch points based on what they clicked on. Oh, this is what they get next because they like this. Instead of us nurturing and saying, oh, we have like 10 weeks or 6 weeks of emails, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, maybe I'm the person asking it likes article 3 and they clicked on that. Based on that, now we're going to serve them this other webinar. Now they've
Right.
clicked on the webinar, they signed up. What are we sending? Oh, this person signed up for a demo. We need to flag that to sales, right? So there are tools like 6sense and HubSpot and everything else that's helping us figure this out. But then you have Gen AI, which is adding that content and the hyper personalization to it. So you can do it by industry, by persona, by company size. However, you see that audience segmentation, you can use the AI to really get personalized information, but that's going to make the experience on the other end much better. And they're going to lean in and be much more engaged because you're engaging and meeting them where they're at at scale. Right before, it was
Right.
scale was the problem with personalization. So I think that is where we're going to see a lot of really great impact, and we're seeing that impact. So even with Amazon, their AI personalized shopping experience, right? They're able to take that data because they have so much volume on customer behavior. They're able to take that and have the AI learn. And now it's optimizing. Here's what you need to do to get everyone to buy with one click. This
Mm.
do these things, and people are more likely to click and buy right now. It's a little dangerous, right? But that's what I'm talking about, right? Like it's basing it not only on what content's working, but on the behavior it's seeing.
Right. Well, and you can draw on these engines to fill in very big and cumbersome gaps because, I'll throw this over to you, Tom. You can use it as sort of as to make recommendations, for example, but you can also, let's say in a customer service example, someone calls in. And I noticed this years ago. USAA was one of the first companies to really figure this out, and I was so impressed. This is like in, I don't know, the early 2000s, I want to say, where I would call and they would say, oh, we recognize your phone number. So, they knew it was me. And that means in a well-defined system in information architecture, that'll trigger a query to my record to bring up what I've done lately, and it can have a recency bias. So, oh, well, he was on the website earlier and he called in earlier this morning. Okay, something's going on here. You can trigger actions. And then, thanks to the power of Gen AI, you can actually suggest to the person in your call center in real time what's happening, suggest this, ask that. And then the beautiful thing is, in that case, it is just a co pilot. You are still the pilot, the human, you're the pilot. It's the co-pilot giving you useful information in real time. That is a magic formula for customer experience, right, Tom? What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're seeing that all over the place now. So like airlines will, for instance, well, you tend to book an aisle seat. So they're going to, they're going to suggest the aisle seats to you now. I mean, the other day I was over the weekend, I was talking about two different topics. One was Jaguar cars, because we were looking at an older one, and my wife and I think, were commenting on it. And then secondly, I was always talking about roofs, because I think my mother-in-law's house needs a new roof. So before you know it, I'm starting to get these ads popping up or content popping up in my feeds on Facebook and whatever, saying, well, here are different kind of roofing materials. This is, these are new ones. It's not all just asphalt shingles anymore. It's these now. And I was like, oh, that's kind of actually interesting.
Yeah, it's
um,
a
Well,
voice
because
of
you're
the
interested in
customer.
that.
Voice
yeah.
of the customer.
So in a way, yeah, in a way it's creepy, but in another way, it's sort of like helpful, right? So
Yeah,
it's like,
Right.
oh, okay, yeah, that was top of mind. I am kind of interested in that. Let me see what they've got here. Maybe we can
right.
start to investigate that a little more closely.
When
Well,
you
and
talk about, yeah, sorry, the
go ahead.
information economy. Now it's not just like the behavior that we see from people. We can actually get even more behavior because they're going to ask questions, and we can say, oh, people are asking these questions.
Right.
Why? So now it's like even more of a double click into not just like their actions, but what they're asking and why
Their
the action's
intent.
happening. Really learning where that intent is coming from.
Right. That's the key is intent. And I can tell you, I've been doing email marketing now for about 3 times longer than the average veteran in the field because it's like 20, I'm afraid to admit, 25 years I've been doing email marketing. And once you can see who opened and clicked, man, you can't go back into the darkness. You just can't do it. Now the data is a little bit fuzzy now, at least on the clicks. On opens, it's still pretty clean. But once you can see that, it's an immediate response and you know where to focus your attention. That's what I learned immediately when I became self-employed back in, I guess, 2003 or four time frame. I had a friend of mine build out a list from Yahoo Groups. That's how old this was, way back when it was Yahoo Groups. And I found business intelligence consultancies, and I got a list of about 100 email addresses, and I put them into my email marketing software I was using at the time, and I sent out a blast saying, "Hey, I focus on
Yeah.
business intelligence. I'd like to help your consultancy, etc." To 100 people. Of the top five I focused on because they had the most opens and the most clicks. I'm like, okay, those people I know are interested. The people at the bottom of the list where it's like no opens or one open, I'm not going to worry about them. I focused on the top five, and within a year, I closed every piece of business. I got business from all five on the top five of that list. I was like, this is the way business should be done because
Right.
now you know where to focus your attention. And this will be a theme we'll pick up maybe in the next segment here, folks. But knowing what to focus on, especially if you're in the marketing world, because guess what? The world is changing all the time. Words, like buzzwords, change all the time. You have to be careful because this one's outdated now, this one's new. We don't want people to misinterpret this. There are all these things that go into your messaging, and that's how you articulate what your business is about and find your ideal prospects. But don't touch that down, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. What a fun show with my longtime friends and colleagues and visionaries, Amisha Gandhi and Tom Augenthaler. We're talking all about AI, Gen AI, the changing landscape, how things are transforming before our very eyes. And personalization is key. We'll talk in this segment about knowledge management too. But Amisha, you had a good point about how to get personalization right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason why hyper personalization is going to be really important is because now, before we base personalization on more of a mass behavior, right, by groups, different groups, now we're looking at the individual level. So
Mm,
it's you're getting served content, you're getting served recommendations, you're getting served the next step in like a B2B sales process, or whatever it is, a marketing nurture based on what you did, what you're interested in. So it's based on your own individual preference, right? Like I'll bring a simple example like Starbucks. it's going to recommend to me everything that has oat milk in it because it sees that that's my history and that's what I like. And I don't order any sugar. So it's not going to offer me those sugary drinks. It's going to offer me different things based on my individual preference. And then if somebody else, like, if my son is ordering on his app, he's going to get like a lot of hot cocoa, like, different things offered to him and food items because it's not based on my preference only, it's based on his, right? So it becomes very individual, and
Right.
that's happening in B2B tech, right? So then you're getting that curation, that prospect is having a really good experience, and they're going to be more engaged because it's based on their interests, not what you think their interest is.
Wow, that's that's a great way to put it. It's based on your interest, not what they think your interest is. It's your actual history with an organization. And yeah, this is not new. A lot of these things are new, but the fact is the tech stack is there now to support this. And you can do it in a financially viable way, even if you're not some huge company. I mean, it was probably 10 years ago I was learning about some of the really big brands were doing these hyper personalized profiles on individuals, and you would have a score basically about you as a person. Well, you have to manage cost, understand what can you reasonably afford. But to Amisha's point, hyper personalization is personalization about you and your behavior so far as I, the vendor or marketer, know. And that's really powerful stuff, Tom, because when you market something to someone who wants something like that, the engagement goes way up. If you're spamming people, and that's what no one wants, it's just nonsense that has nothing to do with me that I do not want. That's spam. I don't want that. And we've seen the whole email world got really hit hard. It's still hit hard. What did my buddy Corey Yansen, who ran a site called Techopedia, he made such a good point a few years ago. He's like, yeah, if email's dead, why do all these social media engines use email so much? Because they're all emailing you, like Facebook and LinkedIn, like, hey, look what happened here. Hey, well, look over there. They're always like barkers, like trying to bring you to their platform. But to kind of pull this all together, the knowledge management side comes from leveraging all that data. And with Gen AI layers, you can now analyze large, unwieldy chunks of unstructured data to learn something about Tom Augenthaler, right, Tom? What do you think?
Oh, exactly. It's like, it's the
Mhm.
difference between driving on a highway and seeing a billboard, right, about some generic thing you probably don't care about. 90% of them you could care less about. And instead having that billboard say things exactly that you're interested in. So from my earlier example, like whether
Yeah.
it's Jaguar cars or putting a new roof on the house or, whatever other thing that's top of mind to me, I mean, compare those two different scenarios. So yeah, so I mean, the Gen AI stuff is just making all of this happen a lot more quickly and efficiently. And it's being able to help marketers, in our case, what we're talking about here, to dial in on where they should be spending their time, what kind of content they should be creating, and where they should be distributing that content instead
Right.
of just
Right.
blasting it out and throwing spaghetti on the wall, so to speak. I mean, now it's, well, let's put out one blog post that's about this topic because we're hearing from a lot of our
Right.
sources that this is what people care about. Now, for a long
Mhm.
time now, we've heard a lot about, addressing problems. So good marketers should be singling out different problems that they're identifying out there in the marketplace, and they should be addressing those problems. But take that even further. What about your ideal buyer? Your ideal buyer in this particular part of you want to call it the sales funnel, right? As it's
Right.
a marketing term, but as people move through the funnel to decision, they're encountering different questions along the way, and they're trying to answer those to the best of their ability. Imagine if you could pick out those people in those different parts of that funnel and direct that content to, whether it's from an influencer, whether it's from their own blog post, or whether it's,
Right.
some article an SME has generated recently, a subject matter expert. So, imagine it being like that.
Yeah, it
So,
can be yeah, it can be very powerful. Like the last company I was at, and it was leading the marketing work there, we found out that it was like 56 touches before we
mhm,
got to close somebody. We
Wow.
actually looked at all the touches we were able to do, and we did a lot more, wrote data analysis. But now with AI, right, some of the new tools that have popped up, we got that down from 57 down to 26 touches. right?
Wow.
Like we really cut that funnel in half because we found there were things that were just junk. We got rid of it and honed it, and we were able to get people to move faster through the funnel because it was more relevant and they allowed them to lean in better. And we got
Wow.
rid of a lot of people along the way because they weren't interested. So we were able to also filter much better.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And this is really important. And, again, in the new world of knowledge management, you can leverage all this first party data. You heard Amisha say that at the top of the hour here. That's a new buzzword, I promise you. And it's going to be very prominent because first party data is the data you already have. It's the data you have about your customers, your products, your behavior, your clickstream analysis, whatever it is. So you have data in your organization. I guarantee you have that data. And now with Gen AI, you can leverage that data much more easily by just grabbing chunks of it, throwing it into the Gen AI engine, asking it questions. And the more relevant you get, the higher that open rate gets, the higher the click through rate gets. And it's sort of a virtuous circle that just kind of goes around and around. I know we've got just about 4 minutes left, 3 minutes left in this segment, but Amisha, I'll throw it back over to you. That story about shortening it from 57 touch points to 26 or whatever, it's wonderful because it shows, number one, that you had the data and you looked at the data and you realized that's a lot of touch points to get to the nut, right? I think about the how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, right? You want to get shortened as possible, not too short, but you want to get it to where it's like, okay, and that's when you're on target, and that's good for morale, right, Amisha?
Yeah, it is because then you're giving sales and you're feeding sales things along the different touch points that actually work and we're not wasting their time. Like if you're managing like an SDR BDR team, right? And I've done that in the past. One person can only make a certain amount of calls and emails a day. Do
Right.
you want them wasting filtering? No, marketing,
Right.
the better you filter, the better intent, the more success and the conversion rate goes up, right? And that's where I'm the hook for. And then along in the sales cycle, somebody goes dark. Are you nurturing them right away? What is working in nurture? What brings people back? And then this is going to inform your account based marketing strategy, right? You do one to one in the enterprise, you're selling to enterprise companies, but there's a lot of tech and a lot of people selling to mid market companies now. They need to do it at volume. And so
Mm.
Gen AI will let you do this at volume and scale too, and it's going to affect things like ABX, ABM, and make that much more viable for one to many model.
Yeah, and to close the loop on all this, RevOps. We're talking about ops, marketing ops, data ops, DevOps, AI ops, all that stuff. RevOps with revenue. I know for sure salespeople really cruise when morale is high. And when you close a deal, your morale goes up. And then you close another deal, and then you close another deal, and it works well. Whereas if you are just running into walls, it's very demoralizing and it's a downward spiral. So the key is to figure out how to get that upward motion, how to keep people engaged. And there's a pace to that, there's a cadence to that. But Tom, like a minute and a half left. The key is to keep morale high, and you do that by reducing friction points, right?
Yeah, reduce the friction points and give people the tools and the know-how to do it better. I think that's a lot of it. And I think a lot of marketing leaders now inside of organizations are going to have to show their people what they want them to do and what they want them to
Mm.
spend their time on. So right now, the meeting notes thing that we talked about, that's great. Let's do the meeting notes. Okay. Chat GPT. Okay. You can use it to generate, if you're struggling to generate an email to somebody that's going to be a little bit difficult, pop it in there, see what kind of suggestion it gives you. Okay. A first draft is easier to work with than no draft. And then it gets even, into the data as to the sales team and all that stuff. I remember when I was a salesman in a financial organization many, many years ago, we would look very carefully at the market and listen to the market. Should we be marketing corporate pension sponsors? Should we be targeting cash managers, treasurers, or whoever? And, we would adjust what products we marketed to them based upon the feedback we were getting from the people that we were speaking to and from
Right.
the analysts that gave us the information within the firm.
Right. And that used to take days or even weeks. And the
Right.
point is now that can be done on an intraday basis. I mean, it depends on your business model, but you want to have that virtuous circle going around and around, fueling the next decision and making sure that you're grounded in your own data. Well, folks, you're listening to Inside Analysis, and podcast bonus segment is coming up next. Stand by. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, time for the podcast bonus segment with Amisha Gandhi and Tom Augenthaler. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh, talking about closing the loop with Gen AI and marketing ops and data ops and AI ops and using AI to your advantage. And Amisha, I'll throw it over to you because you made a great point at the break about how Gen AI now gives marketing a real tool for explaining to the business what their data means, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've always had the tools, right? But marketing is on the hook. And so a lot of people think marketing, oh, we just deliver leads and that's gone. That's old school marketing thinking. What we're actually doing is like, how do we help drive the bottom line? How do we drive market awareness? How do we lead markets? How do we make markets, right? Marketing can do that. So, and we're a revenue based function where we help build the business, right? We do brand and everything else, which everything is pretty, but we can help build the business. So when your CEO comes and says, what is going on? You're able to say, here's what's going on, here's why. And marketing is bringing insights back into the business to help build the business. Like, hey, this content is working. You're talking to sales and you're using their data and saying, here's what's happening across the entire customer journey. You're talking to customers. Now your go-to-market strategy is much better informed. You're able to figure out who your ICP is for real, because everyone's ICP is not correct all the time. I'm still finding, which is
For
crazy,
real.
right? It's either too broad or too narrow. It helps you do that. Then it gives you that personalization. Now you bring all of the learnings back, not just to marketing, so marketing can do a better job, but back to the business overall, the customer, to this. You tie all of that data and it's about orchestration now, right? That data orchestration insights within that executive team. Now, as a business, you're making better decisions overall by looking at all of it in a holistic picture, right? And
Right.
that marketing can help bring their piece in, but you tie it all together and you orchestrate it, not just across marketing, but across sales, product. Then you're getting into really good GTM. Your go to market is just much better. It's more strategic, it's more informed. And now you're helping lead the business. It gives marketing that seat at the table, I think, in a much more solid way. And it makes it easier for us to say this is what we're doing and this is why it's working and what's not working too. So it's going to
Wow.
give us a lot of that. And we're able to bring that back to the business and really help lead it, honestly, I think.
Well, and you know what's really interesting here is that content sells. I think most people understand that, depending upon what business you're in. I mean, in consumer goods, it's not as much. It's more on the product and the pizzazz and so forth. And B2B, for darn sure, you want really good content that articulates your value, articulates your either technology or your service. And so to have that feedback and to understand which pieces of content are working, that should drive the business, right, Tom?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's an old saying in the marketing space about content is king, and that remains the fact, it remains true, but now the quality level of the content has got to be higher than ever, and it's got to be more personalized, as we've been discussing throughout this whole show, and addressing the needs and the concerns of the ideal buyers more so than ever before. Now, the wonderful thing is that Gen AI tools can really help you do that. And as Amisha was just saying, if you can bring back this data into the organization through the marketing channels and the sales channels combined, and then actually start to drive the business bottom line with that information by steering the organization in the direction it needs to go, that's incredibly powerful. And I don't know of any CMO right now that would turn down that kind of an opportunity.
Right,
Well,
and
and
we're
it
all
also,
learning how to do it, right? So
yeah.
that's the whole thing. It's a learning process as we're all learning what tools are working. The tools we've already used, like 6 Sense Hub, so they're building an AI into it, right? New tools are coming in, new companies are popping up. So, I think we have to keep abreast and knowledgeable, but we have to keep our ships running, right?
Mhm.
So you're not just going to innovate for innovation's sake, right? So people are going to bring this in slowly and figure out what's working, what's not working, learning from each other. Like I belong to several groups, so people are talking about, hey, I did this, it worked for me, check it out, what have you, right? But we're still business leaders, so we have to really look at things and bring things in. It's not like we're saying, oh, Gen AI is here, throw out everything you've been doing, revamp
Right.
everything. We can't do that because we would not get the results that we need. It is kind of like this thing where, when the internet happened, things changed quickly, but they also changed slowly within the org, right? Like people brought it in. What are we doing? How is this helping? Right? It's a process. And so we're in the process of learning, but it's just happening a lot quicker now. The
Yeah,
velocity
no,
of change is faster, but we're still learning.
right. Well, and you also both made a really good point, one way or another, which is give credit where credit is due. And what's great about this observability that we now have into all the data, understanding the data, being able to analyze what was very complex data just a year and a half ago, you can now distill very quickly and very effectively and share with the rest of the organization so people know, so the marketing people know what the salespeople are dealing with, the salespeople know what the marketing people are dealing with, the administration knows what the different component parts of the organization are dealing with. That sort of empathy, I think, drives collaboration and really improves morale overall. Tom, final thoughts from you.
Well, great. Well, I think that, yeah, the human component remains supreme because we all, as Misha just said, have to learn from all of this and we have to be able to apply it within the context of our own organizations, right? And that doesn't, it's not a cookie cutter approach. So what works for one company might have to be nuanced and changed when you move to a different company, right? Because their constituents are different. So I think that that's a lot of it here. We have to keep flexible in terms of our thinking, but at the same time, we have to be willing to learn new things. And I think that that's what's being, people are being tasked to do more so than ever these days. It's to learn these new tools. How can you best be apply them? And one of the best ways to do that is just start to apply them in your own work life. Start to
Hmm.
improve your own workflow, and then you can start to help others on your team about how to do something similar. And it builds from there.
Yeah, and you reminded me of something Steve Lucas said. He's now the CEO of Boomi. I think we all know Steve. He's like one of the nicest guys and
Yeah,
best leaders I've ever met. I mean, he's just a very bright star,
right.
and he cares about his team. He cares about people, and that really shows. And he said that he instructed his whole team, you will use Gen AI in your workflow. Find some way to use it, play around with it, and that's how you understand. That's how you learn, and that's what we're in right now. As Amisha said, we're all in this process of learning what are all these new tools, how can they improve our day-to-day operations, our workflow, and help us collaborate better. That's the objective. That's the mission. 60 seconds, final thoughts from you, Amisha.
I think, look, Gen AI is here. We're all using it in different ways. It can improve, but it's a tool. Remember, it's a tool to help you do your jobs better, make your teams better. So bring in training for your teams, understand how it's working, get smart, right? And you should also, like as Tom said, use it yourself too, right?
Right.
Don't just expect, people and don't, manage from an ivory tower. But I think we all kind of get into the weeds with it, learn from it, and then we can bring value back to the business for better outcomes. And then don't forget, we need to also have some governance around it and some rules around it. As where is it pulling the information from? Is it the right quality, right? So we still have to have that QA check also. It's not just like, Pollyanna, right? It's like really do the QA check on it. And then, like I said, it's like we're all learning, we're all figuring this out together. I think the companies that are going to innovate will do it in a really great, pragmatic manner by experimenting while they're keeping the lights on. And they're the ones that are going to lead their businesses in and really lead the charge and bring in some revenue for their business.
Yep, and it's all about the revenue. Well, folks, look these folks up online, Amisha Gandhi and Tom Augenthaler. His name means eye on the coin. How do you like that? It's cool stuff. And of course, yours truly. Send me an email if you want to be in the show, info@insideanalysis.com. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.